This is the Welcome to Humanity podcast with thought leader and transformative psychiatrist, Dr. Fred Moss. This show focuses on the betterment of humanity on a global scale. Each episode will leave you enlightened, inspired, and ready to make an impact in your world. Welcome to the show. Welcome to your life. Welcome to humanity. Here's Dr. Fred.
Okay, well, welcome listeners to another incredible episode of the Welcome to Humanity podcast. And as you've heard me say recently, you know, part of the pleasure, part of the honor, part of the privilege of having a podcast is getting to have conversations with just extraordinary people. I mean, in the end, there's something selfish about having this podcast because I get to meet and really speak with and really learn about and then really present just spectacular human beings. Now, sometimes they don't see themselves as spectacular, or sometimes, you know, it's not clear that there's something extraordinary about who they are. And other times it's pretty obvious that we're talking to somebody who's just, you know, shaking the planet, someone who's making a difference. And dare I say, that's who we have today. So today I am joined by a friend, actually. You know, sometimes I don't know the people I interview so well. And in this case, I actually have a relationship with the person we're with today. Dr. Khush Cooper and I have worked together on a number of occasions. We've been co-participants in a few different courses. She's actually been a leader in a course for which I was a participant last summer. And we've really traveled in similar or parallel circles. I guess parallel circles, I don't know about all that, but congruent circles, and share, I think, the willingness or the eagerness to be a contribution to humanity. So Khush, welcome, really deep and honest welcome to the Welcome to Humanity podcast.
Thank you very much, Fred.
Yeah, it's really, really great to have you here.
I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, I'm going to go, you know, Khush sent us, Dr. Cooper. You want me to call you Khush, Dr. Cooper? How would you like
Khush would be great.
All right, of course, we'll go with Khush. So that's easier for me as well. And you can call me Fred while you're at it.
Dr. Cooper makes me feel more grown up than I think I am.
Isn't that true? Like Dr. Moss does that for me. I can live with Dr. Fred these days and I can live with Fred, but this Dr. Moss thing, it doesn't work anymore for me. It used to be something I really, you know, sort of honored and cherished. And now it sort of means something that I don't necessarily align with. So I hear you. We'll call you Khush for the rest of his ride.
Each and every one of us is really dealing with something, right? No matter whether we're tackling some of the big problems in the world or maybe even the tiny ones, we all face challenges. Now, I've been a psychiatrist for many years, and I've worked with all kinds of people from all walks of life. I've worked with more people than I can really count, from various backgrounds, dealing with more issues than you can imagine, of all sizes and shapes. So naturally, over time, I've developed a number of ways to assist others in gaining a new sense of freedom and empowerment. Now, I'm pulling back the curtain on one of those methodologies, and I'm going public, revealing the process and associated mindset that contributed to using this particular method with maximum effectiveness. It's all laid out in my new book called Creative 8, Healing Through Creativity and Self-Expression. You can pick this book up on Amazon.com in either Kindle or paperback format. And as a listener to the Welcome to Humanity podcast, I'd like to offer you a completely free copy in audiobook format. Just go to welcometohumanity.net/creative and download your free audiobook copy of Creative 8 today. I really look forward to hearing about your Creative 8 breakthrough. Now, let's get back to this amazing conversation.
So Khush sent me a little bio about herself, and I'm going to sort of dip and turn into this bio as I introduce her to you, our listeners. So Khush Cooper is an MSW and a Ph.D., and she is an adjunct assistant professor at the UCLA Luskin School of Public Affairs. Khush is many different things, including a consultant to public child welfare systems and private child welfare organizations in many areas, including foster care reform, LGBTQ, youth and systems, implementation science, and leadership. Khush is a teacher. And that's for sure. She teaches in child welfare research, leadership, public policy for children and youth, and it goes on in that list. Khush received her Ph.D. in social work from Luskin in 2010. Now, even more than that, on the consultation side, Khush is a social entrepreneur and a specialist in what's called implementation science. And Khush is the CEO of a company called, what is it?
Implematix, like Implematix.
Implematix, a firm which assists government and private agencies to become agile in the ways in which they conceive, plan, execute, and measure their innovation work in a rapidly changing world. Look, I could go on, and we could do this for another few minutes to tell you more and more about Khush's commitment to being a massive contribution to humanity, but I'm not going to do that right now. And you'll be able to read this if you haven't already read it when you're listening, it'll be loaded up next to the actual podcast. So Khush, let's just get started with this conversation. I'm eagerly been pursuing Khush to be on this show for several months. And, we've kind of almost did it almost had it done, and then it didn't. And now here we are today. So, I'm going to open up with an open-ended question. I kind of gave you a hint at it earlier, right before our talk. And the question that I'm just going to lay out to you, Khush, is today, as you look at yourself, as you consider yourself, I'm really just a basic question of who are you? Who is you? And feel free to go in any direction you want with that, for real.
Well, I think, where I'd like to start is sort of the context for why I exist. And that is for supporting humanity to become what's coming, to evolve. And everything I do is inside of that commitment. There's nothing wrong with where humanity is now. We might say that we've outgrown some of our ways of being and acting. And, as we molt, I'd like to be there alongside 7.6 billion people so we can molt into what, the universe might have in store for us. So inside of that context, I'm a teacher, I'm a professor, I'm a parent, I'm a daughter, and the vehicle that I have chosen to support the evolution is working with children on the margins. And I work with children on the margins for this reason. I think Michael Crichton has a quote that talks about the edge of chaos, right? And that's truly where transformation happens, where the boundaries of one thing are starting to bleed into the boundaries of another. Children on the margins live at the edge of chaos. They understand where families, groups, societies have failed, yet their brains are plastic enough to be able to point to what could be. So an example is very young transgender children. Very young transgender children know exactly what gender is and what gender isn't.
Now, when you say very young, Khush, can you give us this is kind of a new emerging science. 0 to 5 transgender. Okay.
Right. And at that age, we call them gender expansive, or we used to call them gender nonconforming. They don't know of themselves as transgender. They don't have a word for it. There's just something they know about themselves that doesn't seem to match with how people are perceiving them or interacting with them, particularly with regard to things we associate with gender. And so, we have been trying to reduce the gender gap, so to speak, for as long as I've been alive. Feminism has taken a crack at it. Critical race theory has taken a crack at it. And if you still look at the income gap, controlling for everything else, there is still an income gap between people we consider women and people we consider men. So what we've thrown at it isn't working.
Right. That's fair to say.
Yeah. Perhaps we're a little better, we're a little different, but we've made incremental progress at best. So that's where, when one talks to transgender children, they have a way of coding gender, right, that is completely different than adults do. Even transgender adults. Children's brains have a way of hybridizing that adults, I find, do not. And so if we are going to overcome the gender gap, I assert that we might want to look to the leadership of very young transgender children. I'll give you another example. We've said, another narrative in our current is that family is in crisis. Right? The divorce rate is, high. It hovers around 50%, depending on what decade you're looking at. And, we see domestic violence, child maltreatment, and just in general, stressed families that are trying to survive in our rapidly changing society. And we haven't really made a dent in that either. I've been hearing about that for a while. Now, if you work with foster youth, right? Children who have experienced some breakdown in the area of family.
Right.
They can tell you exactly what family is and what family isn't. And when you talk to them about family and what they need around family, their answers start to point at a version, an evolution of the construct of family that you and I wouldn't point to. And that's also partially because their brains are plastic. They are hybridizing aspects of family that they know to work and putting it together and striving for it. And if we can just get out of their way and support them to lead us, they might be able to help us make a dent in this crisis of family that has plagued us for, again, as long as I can remember. So, the way I say it is when children on the margins thrive, they lead us into what's next for the planet. And my teaching, my consulting has all been around supporting children on the margins to lead. And so sometimes that looks like foster care reform. Sometimes that looks like leadership development. Sometimes that looks like helping organizations that support youth implement innovations for youth well. But it all is in the interest of that commitment. Being a parent is in the interest of that commitment. I've spent years in the social work field taking care of other people's children, so to speak. And I, until recently, did not think that having any of my own would make much of a difference for me. But I saw, partially out of, a lot of the coursework that you and I have done together, Fred, that there's an individual, family, and group aspect to being with children that I had not experienced. I had not discovered it for myself. And that impacted the work that I was doing. And that resulted in me embarking on a journey to have children. And I have 3 very small children at the moment. I had them late in life. And it has fulfilled on every discovery to date that I hoped it would. And the oldest one is only 5. So I can't wait to see what the next 50 years as a parent.
Yeah, the next becoming. Exactly. Wow. Okay. Well, Khush, that's an amazing list of really like what matters to you, who you are, what you're a stand for, who you're a stand for, how you see the world unfolding and becoming and evolving, who is bringing us the sort of the cutting edge of what that world becomes as it does become what it becomes, who like you see yourself as sourcing or supporting the cutting edge of where it appears to be emanating from, at least from your viewpoint of like what is the crisis in family or what is the gender gap, the effort that we have to whatever normalization towards the gender gap that we have been taking on, not only, for our life, but beyond the years of both of our lives, that has been something to at least explore. And, as you speak, your level of articulation and your level of being able to link things together that many of us only see from the outside is inspiring and extraordinary. You should know that. It's like you're linking together things that some people occasionally think about, and what at least appears to be emanating from you is not only someone who has thought about it, but someone who has put together a chain of a sensible cascade of putting these things together, and then being on the outer edge of that, making a difference with the children on the margins, like the children on the margins who are really bringing to us that which is the future that's unfolding in front of our very eyes, that of which we as a society are becoming. How's that, Khush? Is that a general understanding of what it is that you just put through?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Right.
Good. Well, let's take a look at this. Let's take a little bit of a deeper dive. And I think what I really like to know, and and I know that we haven't really like rehearsed this. And so there's an opportunity here, I think, Khush, to really look at how to put this. Like your commitment didn't start in the coursework that we did together. Your commitment, it isn't like, you were just just moseying along, and then you took a course, and then you became your commitment. Frankly, all that really happened, at least as I see it, is that what was in the way of you being an actual stand for your commitment was unconcealed, and you are now left free to be and act as the person you are for the world around you. Now, given all that, let's give, and if you want to alter or amend that, please do so, but let's give a look at, like, who were you, or who have you been before you were this that had you get to that which you are now? Meaning a little bit of your history, which I really don't know, a little bit of your personal growth and development before you actively became involved, in actual, like, capital G, capital D growth and development work. Who was Khush Cooper that had you now being such a committed, such a dedicated, such a strong stand for what it is that matters to you?
Sure. So I'll try and give you the arc in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I was born in Mumbai, India, and actually spent the first 9 years of my life in the United Arab Emirates. My parents actually lived there, but they wanted us to have Indian nationality. That's where my mother's ancestry is from. That's where my grandparents that were alive, my mother's parents lived. And so they would just fly over to Mumbai while in my mother's pregnancy, and we would be born there. And I have a younger sister. There's two of us. And then we'd fly back to my father in Abu Dhabi, and like I said, that's where I spent the first 9 years of my life. And I attended elementary school with the children of British expatriates, essentially British professionals that worked in the oil industry, essentially.
Wow.
And so I learned at a very young age that it was better. I got along better in school if I had a British accent. So I had a British accent for the first 9 years of my life. Then I'll tie that accent piece together with who I am now. When you speak in people's language, they become comfortable. Right?
Yeah,
and it's
great.
it's the fastest way in, I've found. Linguistics is the fastest way in. So the political situation in the Middle East, got a little conservative by the time I was, 9 years old, 10 years old. And, my parents, having two daughters, one of them approaching adolescence, decided that the Middle East probably wasn't a place where they would like their children to grow up. So I spent my middle school years in Mumbai. My mother, sister, and I lived with my grandparents, and my dad still lived in the United Arab Emirates because the dirham was slightly more valuable than the rupee at the time, and we were saving up to move to the United States of America.
Wow.
So I spent the time where we were in line to get a green card to become what we call resident aliens, which I think is a really funny term, but become resident aliens in the United States. And so middle school was in Mumbai, and then by the time high school arrived, I spent my 8th grade year here in the United States. We moved to Delaware. And so in middle school, I had more of what you would associate with, having an Indian accent. And by the time we moved to the States, I had learned how to develop an American one. So people will often say, well, you don't have an accent. And I will respond, this is an accent. So I've been a global citizen, essentially, all my life. And so, what people in one culture, and, I moved continents, not cities.
That's
and
right.
So what people take for granted in one culture, I could see very quickly is not taken for granted in other cultures. The rules are different. The way you build relationships are different. And folks listening is different. And so if you can speak into people's listening, you are welcomed in at a higher rate. And that was the name of the game as a child, right? You assimilate and assimilate fast. In terms of, I was always bright academically. And so, when we moved to the States, I ended up getting a scholarship to, a college preparatory school where very few people looked like me. And I tolerated being somewhat of an outsider because I knew that this education was going to get me to the next level. which was getting into a great college. And that emphasis on education is, I have South Asian descent. My heritage is Zoroastrian. We're the people that lived in Persia when it was Persia, before it became Iran. And so education is front and foremost in terms of the parental culture. So I could see up until getting my master's, a lot of my education was about accomplishment and not necessarily about furthering a commitment. And so here's where the tables turn. I had gotten an undergraduate degree in psychology at Duke University, prestigious university, a good girl. And I decided that Delaware for sure was too cold. North Carolina was closer, but still not warm enough. And so I was going to move to California. California was where I was going to go after my undergraduate study. So I did that. Yeah. Yes.
Yay, California.
And I'm not leaving. I came here in 1996, and this is where I think I will stay. And wanted a break from psychology, actually, and adolescent development and what I had studied. And so I was going to work on my hobby, which was documentary filmmaking. I had a couple cable shows and made a couple documentaries in college. So moved to Los Angeles, and that's what I was going to do, at least for a few years. When you want to get into the film industry as a 20-something-year-old, I found that you start at the bottom. And in Los Angeles, in order to make ends meet, I realized that 9 to 5 at a production company wasn't going to cut it. And so I was going to need a weekend job. Looked in the paper, and I saw a call for being a child care worker at an organization called the Gay and Lesbian Adolescent Social Services. And
so, you share that aspect with me anyways. You know that, right? Like that I call myself a glorified child care worker. I've been a child care worker 40 years and 8 months. I started on January 5th of 1980. And, the whole reason I became a doctor was sort of on the fly of becoming an even better child care worker. So the CCW 4B is what I was. So anyways, back to you. But I indeed am a fellow child care worker.
You're a kindred spirit. And that's what I would say too. I'm still a child care worker, child care worker at heart. So, I work the weekends, so what this would be like, Saturday, Sunday, 7 to 5:30. You wake them up and do breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and they're with you all day, right? Because they don't go to school. And so, I too remember the day I started. It was October 31st, 1996. Now, October 31st is an important day in the United States of America.
Yeah,
and it's particularly important to the LGBT community.
Interesting.
It's because there's permission.
Yes.
Right? There's a certain permission on Halloween to express oneself.
Yes.
Right? And express oneself gloriously.
Yes.
But perhaps that permission isn't granted the other 364 days.
Right. It's like a combination of either taking off the mask or putting on it. It's like the both things. It's like an opportunity to really dig into who you would be if you could be totally self-expressed, I guess, is what's
absolutely. And the Halloween parade in West Hollywood is still probably the country's most famous Halloween parade. They closed down, like 5 city blocks. And, I think at last count, there were, like 50,000 people that go. Obviously, it was canceled this year. So October 31st, 1996, I knock on the door of this large craftsman in Miracle Mile in Los Angeles, and the door is opened by a 14-year-old young man who looked like the best Esmeralda from The Hunchback of Notre Dame. I mean, the best Disney princess, essentially, I'd ever seen. And it took one look at him and realized, well, I was home.
Wow.
And, very soon Hollywood became a thing of the past. I decided to go on to get my master's in social work. I I ended up running the group home and ended up running other departments in the organization. And, my last job for anyone else was actually their director of research and quality. But we're still we're still at accomplishment, right?
Right.
We're still
right.
at accomplishment. And
Rather than, now this is juxtaposed to commitment or juxtaposed. Is that what
exactly.
you're saying?
Having my education, having my life be in the interest of a commitment.
Yes.
However, when I started to work with these children, these LGBTQ children, I was just amazed by their resilience and their willingness to, as children, live unapologetically.
Yes.
Right. And be who they were in the face of abject harassment at school, rejection from their families, and, rejection from society for the most part. And I was in wonder, how do they do it? How do they do it and yet are able to deal with all that and greet me with a smile every time I show up? And that's when I started to see there's something here. They have the answer to something that humanity needs. And working with them, elevating their, the situations they faced so that they could thrive, so that they could actually be free to have us develop these answers to some of these age-old questions about gender or family that we'd been struggling for a long time. That became the commitment.
Wow.
Right. And so that's when it turned is, those 400 children that ended up coming through the Glass Group Homes, called it Glass, the Glass Group Homes from 1996 to 2006. I was there 10 years. And those we owe, whatever humanity becomes, I would say we owe it to those 400 children.
So this seems like it's in its genesis, it seems like it's an entirely effortless sort of natural emergence of a commitment that isn't like you were trying to locate. It actually just became that which you then could be, or something. Like it showed up for you as just now who you are. Like that's it. Like at home, as you called it.
Absolutely.
Beautiful. Please continue.
So at that point that, all the education ceased to be about accomplishment. It became in the interest of supporting society to support the children, right? And support their leadership. And so, LGBTQ.
Let me ask you to go back, because I think I interrupted at a really important pinnacle of what you were saying about declaring, how the world is eventually to become or has become since then. We can owe it to, these 400 or what these 400 children represent. Can you just say a bit more about that? Because it's such a provocative statement. And is there something you can just shine a light on for me and our listeners regarding that statement?
Absolutely. So, it's in the area of expression. So the words, the very language that they used, right, to navigate life was distinct, right? It was distinct, and it was a language that I could see brought together disparate currents in a way that only children and adolescent brains can. So, an example I give is, Pidgin English, right?
Yes.
Children created Pidgin English, right? Just out of, I've got Creole over here and I've got English over here. And, we don't want to speak two languages. We're going to create one. So if you espouse the concept, which I do, which is that language is what creates world, right? So new language will create new worlds. They had this new language that was going to create a new world, right? And so how to get them to speak, right? How to get people to hear what they were saying and how they were saying it, right? And I started to ask myself the question, what would the world have to look like so these children thrive? What is that world? And that world, I've asked myself the same question, when working with children on the autistic spectrum, which is, well, hang on, what kind of a world, what would the world have to be for them to thrive? It'd be a world that would be pretty jarring to us, right? But a world actually made for them would be a completely new world. And so, that it's the linguistic access. It's the things they said, right? It's literally the things they said every day that started to paint a picture of what the world could look like. And again, without making where we are wrong, like we have as humans, we have taken over the planet. Something is working, right? But when you work with LGBTQ youth, you also work with youth who are homeless, street youth, right? And, there's some horrific things that happen, right?
Got that.
When you're a kid on the streets, and you have to survive in ways that perhaps are unimaginable to the rest of us. And so, at the same time, I'm just amazed by the resilience of these children, but I am watching the underbelly of society.
Beautiful.
And I'm realizing, well, I think we're due for an upgrade, right? And if, 2020 hasn't taught us anything, it's probably taught us that, is that I think everybody would agree with me now that we're due for an upgrade.
Yeah, yeah.
And I have people to go talk to, right? Transgender children, foster children, right? Who can give us access, who can create language of this new world that might provide us with that new possibility for human beings.
So it's really, I don't have real words to describe what it is that you just put forth other than, incredible and thank you, fully grateful, extraordinary, all those things that I could shower you with. And really, and please allow me to do so. And there's something greater than that I want to say. So in the first place, please, accept my acknowledgement of the beautiful aspects of who you are on the edge of what is really possible or necessary in this required upgrade that each and every one of us who would, who can keep our eyes open another second would agree with is now due. There's an opportunity here to really get, my listeners might share, your life has left you perfectly equipped to do exactly what you're so the thread that you just drew, and I'm not sure you're aware of this, is that, this natural course of the history that you just described for us of who you were, who you then became, how you developed and who you are now is beyond sensible. There's something here Khush is on the front edge of what is here to occur should we be able to create a world that works for everybody, or certainly if it can work for this
if it
LGBTQ,
can work for a 15-year-old
exactly.
African-American transgender girl,
then we're doing something right. If it can work for them, then we have expanded to a place where we're doing something different than we're doing now in the proper direction of moving that needle forward. I think that's fair to say.
Yes.
So, wow, let's take another look at this then. Let's look at where maybe what I guess, and it's such a can of worms, so I want to be a little bit careful about this. So speaking to our listeners, so there's some, I think it's fair to say that some of our listeners have their jaw totally dropped by listening to who you are. I just want to say that. And now they're eager on your next word. What is it that you can tell? What can we do? Who can we be? What should we be looking at that is now us becoming part of this necessary, required, imminent, should we choose to survive, upgrade of humanity? Where should I look? What should I do? What should I begin saying? What should I stop being? And those kinds of things. Have you got little tidbits that you might be
Absolutely.
able to... Okay, go ahead, please.
The short answer is partnership. And so the partnership being the we that I and you become, right? And you could say hybridization. I've been looking for the right word, and hybrid is as close as I can come to it. But there's a bridge between I and you, right? That becomes we.
Yeah.
And then the we speaks, right? The we designs the world, right? So you can have Democrats and you can have Republicans, right? And we've been doing this, it's kind of just like the Super Bowl, right? There's the AFC and there's the NFC. To me, it's the same thing. And, what would it look like? What would the we look like there?
Yeah.
And so you can do that on any level, right? You can do that, for any time one experiences there's me and there's them.
Yeah.
Right?
And us and them. Yeah.
Exactly. Ask yourself, what do we be? I know it may seem abhorrent at the time because we may look or feel like such complete opposites, right? But the practice and the skill in being able to approach as we, right, is what's, in my opinion, going to do it. Because, the us and them bit, it doesn't work.
No, it's pretty close to fully bankrupt at this point. Pretty close. If not, indeed.
Nationalism hasn't worked.
It just doesn't work.
Right? So look for ways to forge partnership, particularly in the areas where it's not working.
Exactly. So you're really talking about even so you're walking right into the teeth of what Welcome to Humanity states is its foundational existence. So this is who this operation is about, and you're right here about gathering up gathering up the us versus them and which after all, we described as us by the borders, if you will. Like you said, the margins of these distinctions is what becomes blurred. So the people on the margins, on the ones who are experiencing them, they're experiencing them at a very, very high concentration level. And those people who can keep a foot into the us and nevertheless experience regularly what it is to be a them and to somehow find peace there are bringing forth an answer that, or at least a solution that is at least provocative and compelling, if not, in fact, exactly the direction we need to go.
You got it. I couldn't have said it better.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, well, look, it's like I got some people, just wrote an article this morning, which I'll share with you. And I'm not going to share with you on this podcast, but I'll send it to you after here, which really, like 2 hours ago, I wrote an article that you'll love because it actually addresses what you just said. It's like, all right, I got someone over there who disagrees with me, and I got someone over there who I actually hate, or I got someone over there who I cannot believe is a co-member, a co-human on the planet at the same time as me. I got someone or a group over there that I cannot tolerate, supposedly. Like, I don't want to hear another word that they have to say. I certainly don't want to hear see another thing that they do along the lines of who they are. And there's something about the challenge right here with me and them, the them there, because they're the ones who do that while I do this.
Yeah, and it's automatic, Fred. It's automatic that we think that way. Our brain just does that.
Right. And in my article, in the article from a couple years ago, which I think we have shared or spoke of, the Global Madness article, we start looking at what would it really take to have 7.6 billion people be the us. Like, we're automatically an us. That's true. We're going to create, you over there is not like us, so therefore you're a them and I can't hang with you. What would it take to have it be, to take advantage of that hardwire and have the us be
all of us?
All of us. Exactly. And
that's the game I play.
That's the game I play. And it's a pleasure playing that game. I mean, it's not always a pleasure like it's pleasant.
Yeah.
It's just a pleasure to have a game to play at that level, because that's what's here to be had. And, what else you got once you start playing that game? So really, really remarkable. Khush, there's going to be some of my listeners who are really, really interested in hearing more from you and, or following you or asking you further questions, or, who knows, even learning from you or meeting you, perhaps collaborating with you. How would someone reach out to you or get a better handle or a greater handle of what you're about if they wanted to do that now?
I think LinkedIn is the best way.
I love LinkedIn. It's the only social media that I really, at least it doesn't make me it doesn't paralyze me quite as much as the others.
And it has some utility. And so,
exactly.
Find me on LinkedIn and send me a message, and then we can, move over into emails and phone numbers and other ways to communicate.
And Khush, is there areas of life that you're now committed to? I hear you at LGBTQ youth and all the other things, and then your bio speaks volumes for what else you do. What do you see now? Like if the future should turn out perfectly, if like a year from now, it's like, wow, that's been the best year we've ever had. Like, whoa. No one saw this coming. And a year, really, let's just go a year. I don't have the 20-year plan in my place right here. So let's just say it all happens in the next year.
Mm-hmm.
What does that year look like? 1 year from now, we're sitting here in Thanksgiving time in 2020. So we're saying, okay, we're going to start looking at Thanksgiving 2021. And it has just been the most remarkable year. No one ever saw this coming. What does that look like?
It looks like everyone having access to the practice of leadership. That's what it looks like. I started working with LGBTQ youth in foster care, and I could see, well, this isn't working for them. Why is it not working? Oh, well, it's their families, right? Their families are rejecting them. Okay, well, why is that happening? Oh, because we don't support their families. The child welfare system doesn't support their families.
Mm-hmm.
So I went on to do system reform. When I got to doing foster care system reform, I could see that wasn't working. So I got, okay, well, why isn't this working? oh, well, look, we actually have some great ideas and really smart people, right? In terms of policies and practices and organizations and evidence-based practices. What's the problem? The problem is implementation, right? We actually don't implement these great ideas well. So I got into the area of implementation science, right? And I could see, wow, that's not going well, particularly in our field. How come? And when you dial it back, all of it dials back to leadership. That's why it doesn't work. It doesn't work because there's a way in which we approach leadership that is too narrow. And so if children, if my MSW students, if my neighbor, right, all had access to the practice of leadership, right, which is an act of creation in itself, right, that is when I think we have a chance making real something different than us versus them.
Isn't that great? Okay, so what we're really talking about here is that everyone really, I excuse me for sort of distilling it or perhaps even dumbing it down a little bit, but I think the clear notion that you're making here is that leaders don't require non-leaders in order to be leaders, that everyone can be a leader, that theoretically, or, like in this act of creation you're speaking of, we could theoretically have 7.6 billion leaders.
Absolutely.
Isn't that great?
Because leadership is a practice that happens in a moment.
Isn't it?
Yeah, it's not an authority. It's not
exactly. I think that's what I'm pointing. That's right. That's what I'm pointing to. It doesn't require followers, at least not followers who aren't leaders. Let's put it that way. That's really. That's beautiful.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So if you
really
see
terrific.
a leadership opportunity and you don't think you're ready and you don't think you're a leader, don't listen to that voice.
Exactly. Thank you. All right. Well, Khush, it's really, of course, been a remarkable conversation, and I hope it's the same for you. And there's, I think we're going to take on one more question that I want to throw your way, which is, you've kind of answered the question of what in the world, tweaks you, like what doesn't work for you here. And so there's this other question, which is the opposite of that, which is what, you mentioned there are things working after all, you kind of say out of the side of your mouth, yeah, humans have taken over the world, so we must have something working okay. That's not really a full-scale endorsement of something that's working. That's sort of like, yeah, that occurred. After all, we own the world, so that we must have done something right. Now I'm going to ask you to find something in our world right now that you can endorse as being something that is absolutely positively working.
Something to endorse. Well, there's lots, right? So which would I pick that is absolutely and positively working?
Yes.
So it's those moments where you have fires, right? The wildfires, and people help each other.
It's brilliant.
Right? When Hurricane Katrina hits and people drive from Maine because they just want to help, right? That spirit that we have, that works. Like whatever that calling is, where, you know what, I don't know what it is, but I'm going to get in my car and I'm going to go find something, when 9/11 happened, right? Those are ringing endorsements, right, of people who do that.
Special. It's really great. Really great. So I think that points to the same thing you've spoken of before, which is the partnership and the leadership and, the essence of humanity and being on the front end, creating a future that works. And really your commitment for children and, who we should be asking are the people who are, 5 years old for guidance and, all the things that you have become, that you are, that we now get to see you as or share the planet with. It's just extraordinary. You are indeed a remarkable inspiration and a incredible specimen of what it means to be human. So from inside you, I assume it doesn't always seem that way, but you should know that to be true. It just is, even when you don't know it. And so thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for being here with Welcome to Humanity, because, your addition and then our capacity to take on what you said has been, upgraded, as you say, just by hearing and being with who you are and how you see the world unfolding and becoming and molting and all the things that you're up to. So Khush Cooper, Dr. Khush Cooper, it's just been a pleasure, an honor, and a privilege indeed to have you on.
Likewise.
So anything you want to say in closing? Anything you want to say either to me or to them, or if there is no them, to all of us, go ahead. Go right ahead.
Just a big thank you. Thank you for the listening.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're really welcome. Thank you. Well, there we have it. Another amazing, another amazing podcast episode. And I just feel blessed. I mean, it's such an opportunity to do what I love doing and to really be curious about amazing people. And so far, I had never met a human who wasn't amazing. So I'm kind of now looking for humans who aren't. And so far, that's not working for me. And there's a real opportunity for each and every one of us to grow and develop right this very moment on the back or on the shoulders or on the leapfrogging or simply the listening of being with someone like Dr. Khush Cooper. So it's been a pleasure. Thanks for getting this far, and whatever going on in your world must be okay because you just spent a whole 55 minutes listening to this, and your life hopefully has been upgraded as a result of that. So I am deeply appreciative. I am in full gratitude. I am giving thanks on this Thanksgiving weekend of 2020 and just honored that you've been able to listen or that you've chosen to listen to the Welcome to Humanity podcast today. So wherever's going on in your world, it's part of the beauty and part of the opportunity. Thank you, thank you, thank you again. And to all of you, welcome to humanity. Have a beautiful rest of your day, a beautiful rest of your week, and a beautiful rest of your life, and we'll catch you on the flip side.
I just want to thank you so much for tuning in to today's amazing conversation. Did you appreciate who this Dr. Khush Cooper was? I knew a little bit about Khush before, but I sure didn't know about her history and just, her world travels. And it's like she is bred completely to be someone who takes a stand for the marginalized children or for the future of all of our lives riding on the shoulders of the children who are marginalized, and then paying attention to bring an optimized life to those particular individuals and doing so fearlessly and with so much love. It is a remarkable experience to have been able to speak with Khush, to discover with Khush, and then to share that with you. Who she is for the public, who she is for the people that she touches, and really who she is for humanity as a whole. What a remarkable, remarkable, remarkable human being. So maybe when you were listening to this, you thought of someone, in your life who really absolutely needs to hear this episode. I'm going to ask you to reach out to them right now, invite them to listen to the episode, and then to subscribe to the Welcome to Humanity podcast. And while you're at it, if you haven't subscribed, please do so now. It makes a huge impact. And that way I can get you the latest episodes as they become available. If you appreciate what we do here, if it's making a difference for you, just take a few minutes and leave a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you're listening to it from. As it turns out that subscribes and reviews are the two major ways we can get more listeners with the Welcome to Humanity podcast, and I would be truly grateful for that support. To catch up on past episodes that you may have missed, head on over to welcometohumanity.net/podcast. Again, this is Dr. Fred, and until next time, this has been another Welcome to Humanity podcast, and thank you for joining us. Remember, have a beautiful day, have a beautiful week, have a beautiful month, have a beautiful life.